Blog Talk Radio. Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good today, thanks. And I want to thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Today on the Voice of Yoga, we will talk about the new moon on July 23rd, 2017 at 5:46 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in Hampton, New Hampshire. Listen as we examine the chart of this lunation and point out some possibilities. The new moon is the time of a new beginning. The best way to predict your future is to create it. We will discuss the value of having a plan to give direction to your intentions. The best life plan addresses your needs, wants, and collective purposes. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. So, Swami, I've been doing some research about the new moon so I could have some points of discussion here. And some things I found out is that the July 23rd new moon influence should last about 4 weeks up to the August 24th solar eclipse. I thought that was pretty interesting. And that the new moon represents the end of one cycle and the beginning of another new 28-day cycle. And here's what I also found out is that July's new moon is going to have a pretty interesting energy. And on one hand, it's going to be calling us to seek the joy, beauty, and pleasure in life. And on the other hand, it's also going to be asking us to take some responsibility for our actions. But I'd rather get your take on what's going to happen within the next couple of weeks regarding this new moon. What can you tell us?
Well, in this particular chart, the new moon falls in the 12th house and is conjunct Mars, and it's also conjunct the ascendant. So that kind of paints a very vivid spiritual picture for me. And the sun, the moon, Mars, and the ascendant are in Leo. And the key phrase is, I will. And the attribute is loyalty. Here in this particular picture, you have the kingdom of God with the will of God, with personal desire, all in the house of union with the divine. One of the things that we constantly say or we talk about as regarding this union with the divine is that loyalty is a huge component in that relationship, because there's only one God, there's only one truth, there's only one religion, there's only one yoga, there's only one number one need. To have a certain sense of loyalty to that is essential, because you can't be totally committed some of the time. And any kind of variation from complete devotion to this resource of energy dismisses it. And in fact, we lose it. That's the fall from Eden in the Bible.
So how do you suggest would be our most advantageous way to use the energy for the next couple of weeks to do exactly what you're suggesting that we do?
Well, the new moon, that's a new beginning. So this could be a new beginning that keeps on giving, basically, especially if we put our efforts in the revelation that we are eternal spirits. In order to really do this, like we said in the beginning, you have to address needs, wants, and purpose simultaneously And the beauty of understanding what your needs are, that your number one need is this relationship with the divine. And that anything less than that pulls you way off point. That was the concept of sin, that you're out of the realms of eternal happiness and you're in the realms of suffering and decay. So understanding what your number one essential need is fundamental but essential. Then the whole thing of our personal wants really comes down to harmonizing my personal interest with divine law seeking expression. So it is a yielding of personal desire for the betterment of this greater whole, which then moves into the concept of a collective purpose. That you are not limited to just personal interests here, but you have a sense of connectedness to a greater whole.
So, well, in the summary that I talked about in the beginning of the show, we said that we would discuss the value of having a plan to give direction to your intentions. Now, intentions and desires can be very closely related. Do you agree with that? Or I know you always say that what we desire, it kind of depends on what we desire determines of what energy fields that we draw from. Well, what about intentions?
Intentions may be what paved the road to hell. Yeah, it kind of can get a little bit complicated. And say, for example, the Yoga Sutras address this in a very different way. They talk about constant practice of detachment and continuous restraint of thought variations. Now, Jesus talked about the same thing when he said you must love the Lord thy God with your heart, your soul, and your mind. And the Buddha said it, that we must desire nothing. So the whole thing of understanding the concept that love really is attraction. Whatever it is that we love is what we are drawn to. In the Yoga Sutras, when they talk about detachment, the thing you have to understand is that we all have desire, that you can't just let go of desire. And so detachment doesn't mean that you dangle. What in the Yoga Sutras, when you understand it, the solution is found in brahmacharya, attachment to their concept of the divine. So when we join with this indivisible unified field, then we start to see pragmatic application of this, that you are able to, first of all, you can practice constant detachment from things that are visible and tangible, from our mortal mental view of reality. You can let go of that if you can attach to your immortal sense of reality. And then, of course, the whole thing of controlling thought variations. Because the beauty of the realms of spirit is that it's unchanging, whereas matter and mind are in constant flux. So when you're attached to particles and waves, then of course your mind is all over the place. But when you are attached to truth and wholeness, this indivisible unified field, you're focused. There's a calmness, there's a stillness that comes with that. Just like Jesus says, but you must love the Lord thy God. You can't just give it lip service and have your body looking for something visible and tangible. You have to love the Lord thy God with your heart, your soul, and your mind. So all your ducks have to be in order. In Kriya Yoga, we say it that you train the mind to serve spirit, and you train your body to serve the mind with that image. When we have that all lined up, and we internalize the right symbol and then it is associated with the feeling that I'm okay, that's when you have yoga. And to me, that's I want to say the higher octave of the symbolism of this new moon.
Now, am I correct in thinking that to love the Lord thy God with my heart, my soul, my mind is my heart, my physical body?
Yeah, the heart is the body's feeling state. That's one of the things that we always say is that the body really has all the power. And mind has vision, but it's feeble and weak. That's why we say that mind and body need each other. And ideally, what you want to do is you want to take lame mind with vision and put it on the back of blind matter with power. And that's how you move forward.
So that's how we get to the love the Lord thy God with our heart, soul, that's it together. Our heart, our soul, and our mind.
Right. Then all your ducks are in order. And that's in Kriya Yoga, we call that purity. Purity is our ability to think, feel, say, and do one and the same thing.
So when you love the Lord thy God, then you're coming from that sense of purity, because with your heart, your soul, and your mind, all together kind of wraps up, and that puts you in a position of purity with spirit.
I want to say, even on a more fundamental level, in order to get spirit in the body as a symbol for validation, we have to purify the body of our erroneous limiting patterns.
Now, you're not just talking about a physical purification, or like not just eating, but also our thoughts. Anything that we allow to come in that disrupts what's going on with us internally.
Right. That you physically have to create a biddable environment to be able to internalize spirit in the body. Because that's why they call it a conversion, that you're going from one source of sustenance to another source of sustenance. And physically, you have to purify your body of its attachment to things visible and tangible. That was the dynamics of what they called the original sin. We basically come in, we look for food, mother, and approval for validation. And of course, once you purge, you eliminate this pattern, then you prepare the body for the invocation of a new pattern. Now, that's the mental purification, that you actually have to create that image.
Well, that's very interesting. So I think for right now, I think we'll pause to hear a word from our sponsors. So listeners, we'll return with you in a few moments. Kriya Yoga Theory 2 is a unique and revolutionary practice and forum designed to facilitate the growth process in human development. Apotheosis is a real experience and has an evidence procedure. You cannot lead someone to permanent change by doing for them what they must do themselves. Personal accountability and responsibility are the foundation of Kriya Yoga Theory 2. You must be engaged and devoted. Prana power brings virtue to overcome fear, wisdom to overcome ignorance, purpose to overcome selfishness, enthusiasm to overcome laziness. Kriya Yoga is a path of action, knowledge, and devotion. These sessions are a celestial positioning system to guide the individual into union with the divine. For more information or to sign up for your next session online, go to www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste. And welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, through my research, I have looked up and have read that the moon is not only going to be joining the sun, but also Mars. And all three celestial bodies will shine up in the sky, sparkling new energy, inviting us to do likewise. So can you give us some more information about Mars and what we can expect?
Yeah, the whole thing of Mars, which has a lot to do with personal desire, and it's also symbolically Mars is the warrior. It is where we find our courage. And I think a big thing is the positive side of Mars is to use that courage to step out of the limited perspective of seeing ourselves as separate, to step out of a body-bound sense of awareness, and to embark on an expanded sense of self, and to give up personal interests, personal desires, to this will of a greater whole, so that we can actually start to become eternal spiritual beings instead of mortal physical beings.
Well, so how do we start making that change? How do we use that? How do we use this energy or our thoughts to assist us to make that change?
The first thing that you want to be able to do is you want to ask yourself the question, do I have attention for divine law seeking expression? Because if you don't, then your reality is limited to a solely material perspective. Unfortunately, that perspective is going to be rooted in sin, sickness, suffering, and decay. That you're kind of like a rat on a sinking ship. That your life is going to be inundated with chronic anxiety and fear. Now, the other thing is that if your answer is yes, then if you do have attention for divine law seeking expression, then you can harmonize your will with the will of God. This alignment will now root you in a reality that is more based on peace, love, happiness, and goodness, eternal, not limited to this particular incarnation. But the whole thing is that if you don't have attention for divine law-seeking expression, then that's where a metaphysical or a mystical system like the yoga that we teach comes in handy, because that's what the practice is all about. It's refining ourselves. It is stripping away a lot of unnecessary dependencies, a lot of the limiting concepts and beliefs that we have internalized and are harboring. And by doing that, we open ourselves up to a different reality.
Using what's going on around us in the astrological world can help us refine what it is that you're talking about, refine ourselves.
Well, you can use the astrology because that originally was a spiritual science, that the movement of the celestial bodies in the heavens was always depicted as the will of God. So that was kind of like a diagram that painted this will of God. Now, the other aspect of that is aligning ourselves with it. And like we have been saying in some of these recent shows that the way that you would evaluate where you are with that is just basically looking at what you want and what you're getting. Because if what you want is not the same as what you're getting, then there's going to be some conflict. And oftentimes there's going to be resistance because you're not in harmony with divine law seeking expression. And what's really interesting is that your mortal material mind can actually eliminate divine law seeking expression in your reality. And that's the whole thing that we were talking about. You know, the role of loyalty in this whole thing is that once you decide that you are going to attune yourself to this will of God, that it really should be an ongoing, just like it said in the Yoga Sutras, it is a constant practice of detachment. It is a continuous control of the variations of the mind.
So if we are getting something different than what we're asking for, I think most people would blame God or the universe and say, well, God's just not listening, right? When actually maybe it's us either not asking for the right thing or not realizing that what we're asking for really isn't rooted in the correct desire.
The way that we create our reality is by the thoughts we think, the feelings we harbor, the beliefs we accept, and the scenes we rehearse in our minds. Now, everything is going to come down to whether we have a sense of connectedness to eternal, immortal mind, or we're getting all of our information from our five senses, and we have a mortal, physical mind. And then, of course, that could be subject to a lot of limiting beliefs. Feelings like, I'm not good enough. Fear of failure, fear of success. That if you are drawing from this lower sense of awareness, this lower perspective, then chances are that you're not going to be getting what it is that you're asking for. The other thing is that, like we have also been saying, is that the concept of God is like the gold behind currency. God is the principle behind truth. Just like in most sciences, that you have these principles, you have these rules, you have these laws that work. And the whole thing that God being good and love and truth, these are things that are backed and principle centered. So in other words, like good health would be backed by God. Sickness doesn't have God's backing. So that would be considered like a false belief. And so a lot of attuning yourself with the will of God is really understanding a lot of how these rules work, how to use principle to your advantage. And in a lot of respects, you know, I mean, you can look at two checks that are written, and one of them has the money in the bank and the other one doesn't. And you don't really know until you deposit it which one is going to give you the principal. And the other one's going to cost you. And it's kind of like that with when you're shaping your reality, to understand do you understand the principle, to understand what is supported by this God-based reality?
So I can reverse engineer this and look at what surrounds me, what's going on in my life, and if I view something as being maybe a little bit more on a negative aspect, then maybe some way I have a thought that I haven't put God first. Because if I put God first, then that divine law-seeking expression would express itself in a more positive way in my life.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of evaluating it. But the other thing, like the Bible tells you, you do have to be careful, because there is such thing as positive results still being supported by mortal, physical, limiting thoughts.
Yeah, so then how do we make that distinction as to, if it's those mortal thoughts that are bringing something undesirable into us, and we think that we were thinking right, then that is the challenge for us, is to find the right way of thinking and putting our energies in that right energy field.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, is that as you go along, that your reality will start to give you those answers. So say, for example, there's a big difference between curing and healing. That oftentimes somebody may have a symptom and they are cured of the symptom, and then eventually it resurfaces or it comes up in something else. Whereas a healing is something that is a done deal, that it doesn't return. If that helps.
It does, because I have heard stories like that. One example is I know of a gal who moved to Arizona because it was too humid up here for her, and she was having all these allergy problems. She went to Arizona, of course it was dry, and then cured that problem, but then she came up with something else. So then she had to, all this meditation came up to the fact that it was something entirely different. So I see what you're saying about that.
And that's the difference between when you're using spiritual laws to affect desired states, as opposed to using lesser sources of sustenance. So in other words, just like we say, if you draw from particles and waves, you're drawing from a limited resource. If you draw from truth and wholeness, now you are drawing from something that has divine law behind it.
All right, well, I think it's probably about that time we have to start closing down our show for today. So listeners, I invite you out there to visit the website. It's www.ipdtransform.com. So once you're there, you can post comments about this show or even give us ideas for future shows. And don't forget, you can access other Blog Talk Radio shows on the Swami Says posts. And also, we do have some really interesting tools for your learning experiences as well. So do keep those comments coming, because we do enjoy hearing from you. Be sure to tune in next week. We'll be talking about realizing your true spiritual nature. So Swami, you have any more thoughts about today's show?
Well, I would like to encourage people to enjoy the new moon, or actually the new moon yesterday, but to enjoy the effects of it, and also the benefit of the grand trine between Uranus, Saturn, and Mercury, to kind of give you some new insights, to form new ideas about your collective purpose, And with that, I'll wish everybody a good day. Namaste.
And thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton along with Swami Jayananda signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.